Hello. In the preceding segment, we defined the forms or types or classes of communication. In this segment, the focus of our study will be on a phenomenon known as metacommunication. And metacommunication is relevant to all forms of communication, as you will see in a short while from now. And it is part of each and every message that we receive or put out, and it very much facilitates our ability to interpret and understand messages. So let's take a look. The word meta, not to be confused with Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, I suppose they use the same word, and for the same reason, is that meta, a Greek word, means greater than, beyond, after, higher than. Okay? It's an adjective meaning more comprehensive or transcending, the one that rises above, a higher level. Meta, typically in English usage, means a higher level. Okay? And you may be familiar with words which use this little segment called meta. Metamorphosis, for instance, is what happens to moths and butterflies. They move from egg to caterpillar to pupae to butterfly or moth. So this goes, it's an upward movement. It gets better and better and higher and higher. Similarly, those of you who are familiar with data science or IT or software would understand the term metadata. Okay, so nowadays when we create HTML or other forms of coding, we also generate what is called metadata. And metadata in the IT sense is information about the code or information about the information that we have. It is data about data. Okay, so you open a file, there's the file and there's the metadata. The higher level, additional, transcending information about the information that you're going to receive. So that's pretty much what it means actually. Metacommunication is therefore defined as a higher order communication. And extending the logic from information technology, communication about communication. And is therefore descriptive of the underlying components of communication, okay? That means that there are multiple sets of components which make up a message. And these are some of those not so visible under the tablecloth kind of situations. Information that's also transmitted with other components, verbal components or visual components or whatever, right? And they're sometimes referred to as cues, C-U-E, communication cue. You could remember clue, remove the L and you're on cue, okay? And therefore communication cues, which are from metacommunication, are non-verbal or non-textual signals that provide additional information about a message or its contents and its contents. So additional information about a message and its contents. So when we look at these cues, the metacommunication that we receive, they fall into two broad categories. One is termed paralingual cues. Paralingual, para, meta, supra, these all describe higher order. So paralingual means the higher linguistic level, super language kind of thing. Paralingual cues and non-verbal cues. Okay, these are the two components that make up the set of metacommunication cues. Let's look at both of these in some detail. So paralanguage is a component of metacommunication and is the collective term given to secondary non-verbal information that is embedded in some way or comes along with, in some case, which wraps what is being spoken, okay? That's very important. It's an integral part of this whole thing. And these cues, the paralingual cues, assist the process of interpreting and understanding and getting the real sense of what is being conveyed. Okay? And the interesting thing is that paralanguage can reach you, the receiver, either because it happens unconsciously on the part of the sender. Okay, that the sender is not conscious of the fact that they're adding some cues that you are receiving. However, in certain cases, the sender may deliberately or consciously add a cue to the text that is being sent in order to create an effect. Okay? And some of this is the way we speak and the way we get the sounds out is referred to, if you need a technical term, it's called vocalics. VOCALICS, vocalics, okay? So these are paralingual cues, okay? And vocalics as a collective term could be the accent that we use, okay? It's very interesting that accent is related to, the kind of where you come from. For instance, Bengalis in Chittagong, Bangladesh, may speak a different version or variant of the Bengali language that you will find in Kolkata, okay? So accents are sounds that we add. Typically, accents are unconscious, but sometimes if we want to fake it, we can put on an accent, right? This is very, very important. There's emphasis. By putting emphasis on one or more word, we can actually subtly change the meaning that the receiver gets. Speed is another factor, okay? Typically, when we are fast, we go. When we are serious, threatening, we drop volume and we drop the speed. I will fix you, right? It has to be that way. Then you get you're getting a feel on this one. So it's not, I will get you, okay? I can say, I will get you, or good morning in so many ways. But the way I say it will convey to you how serious I am, how dangerous this thing is, or how happy this thing is. It will give you a load of information. There's a number of things that come into play. So the paralingual cues, the vocalics, will actually start giving you information which helps you to interpret the sounds that you're hearing. Similarly, like speed, there's pitch. Okay? So when we are nervous and anxious, our pitch goes up. When we are yelling, our pitch goes up. Okay? When we are cool and calm and collected, we speak softly, slowly, with emphasis. This is what paralingual cues are all about. It gives you a lot of information about what is being said. Does the person really mean what she's saying, or is it something that's just on the surface? Similarly, we look at intonation. Languages are musical in nature. They have rhythm. So you have cadence and intonation. These two go to speed, pitch, intonation, and cadence are 4 variables that can be applied to spoken messages to subtly embed additional information that will help you to actually interpret it. We'll look at some examples of these, okay? Another form of vocalics, of metacommunication paralingual cues, which are typically unconscious or subconsciously communicated, are what we call fillers. The ers and the ums and the ahs, and in India, matlab. So every third word will be a matlab, matlab, matlab. So, or so, we add so to everything else, right? So these could indicate things like hesitation or the fact that you're thinking, or the fact that you're not finished, or a number of such situations. And finally, I love to say this, silence itself is a vocalic, it's a cue. I ask you a question, you're silent. Now, what do I take away from that? Typically, there are default options. So silence means guilty, silence means something else, and so on and so forth. Everything that we do, whether we speak and sometimes when we don't speak, is providing paralingual information to the receiver. So, we talked about the fact that emphasis can change meaning, and let me give you an example of that. So I have this sentence which says, I did not tell Tara that you were late. I'm trying to say this as bluntly as possible. Very simple. I did not tell Tara that you were late. Now, the moment I start putting emphasis on, different things happen. I did not tell Tara that you were late. Now, it means something else. Somebody else told her. When I say I did not tell you, somebody else did. I did not tell Tara that you were late. I'm being more emphatic. Absolutely did not tell her that you were late. I did not tell Tara that you were late. I sent her a SMS. I did not speak it. I did not tell. So when I put the emphasis on tell, it means I sent it in some other way. I did not tell Tara that you were late. Actually, I told Tara's sister who told her. So when I put the emphasis on Tara, it means that it's not Tara. I did not tell Tara. Okay? That's what we were trying to say. And finally, you can keep doing this, but as the last one, I did not tell Tara you were late. I said that Bala was late, but somehow that got mixed up. So it's important. So when we speak, when we put emphasis, the other person understands that it's important in some way, that it's something that I need to think about. The emphasis has provided a paralingual cue that helps the receiver to better interpret the message. So even something as simple as pausing and the pronunciation of punctuation will actually change meaning. Okay, a comma is a pause, and it's a smaller or shorter pause than a full stop. Okay, so when you see a comma in a piece of text, it tells you that you have to pause, and that pause and the punctuation associated with it can change the meaning. Here's a sentence. Raja the tiger is sick. Raja the tiger is sick. That's very simple. There's a tiger, and his name is Raja, and he's sick. Now, if I put a comma in after the word Raja, I will now say this phrase as Raja, pause, the tiger is sick, which means something else, which means I'm now speaking to somebody called Raja and informing Raja that the tiger is sick. So by putting in the comma and actually giving effect to the pause that the comma indicates, I have changed the interpretation of the sentence. So it has great relevance in terms of where you pause, how long you pause, and thereby change the message that the other person will get. He is married happily is another one. He is married, comma, pause, happily. Okay, that's changes the meaning from saying he is married happily to he is married happily. Right. Or here's a really interesting one. It says, I find inspiration in cooking my family and my dog. I find inspiration in cooking my family and my dog. But if I have to put in the punctuation, which I need to, because here we're talking about somebody who's possibly a cannibal, who loves cooking his family and his dog and having them for dinner, right? Frightening. However, if you put the commas in, it becomes, I find inspiration in cooking, pause, my family, pause, and my dog. So you find inspiration in each one of these three things separately and not in actually preparing meals based on body parts. So pausing and punctuation, very, very important. They change the way people will interpret what you're saying. Let's move to body language cues on the second component of the classification of metacommunication. And understand that actually most body language cues or nonverbal cues are involuntary. This is very important to understand. According to Charles Darwin, who wrote The Origin of the Species, facial expressions are an external manifestation of a person's internal state. As such, facial expression, as also other forms of nonverbal communication, contribute much value to the process of communication. Now, Charles Darwin was a naturalist and a biologist and so on and so forth. But even he made this comment about how body language, the signals we receive from sentient beings, we talk about inanimate objects maybe separately, tells us much more about ourselves and how we actually feel internally. So emotions in some way come forward, right? And therefore, body language cues reveal much more about ourselves than we might wish to. And so we have to be aware of this fact that we are in some ways blind to how we look, how we move, how our face looks, etc., etc. However, if we can control it, then we can use it to advantage. Okay? If you can keep your visage, your face, completely expressionless, the other person doesn't know what's happening, behind your face. So people like the Japanese as a culture have mastered the art of being expressionless. Very difficult to negotiate with Japanese people because you can't see into their eyes, okay? So body language cues are important. And when we talk about these non-verbal cues, there are different classifications and they are nice little words to use. For instance, our gestures, the use of our hands, our posture, and so on and so forth, are considered kinesics. Kinesics means to do with body. When we talk about non-verbal cues such as eye contact, now eye contact is a very large portion of non-verbal, that it conveys large quantities of information to the other person. The name for this set of cues is oculesics. Ocu to do with eyes, oculesics. There's another non-verbal cue which is called proxemics. You might have heard the word proximity. Proxemics, it talks about space, the space between you and the other person, okay? If I have to threaten you, I need to get close to you. I can't threaten you from 3 miles away. You won't even hear it and you won't even be bothered by it. So some people do this. You might have found that when people want to make you uncomfortable, they get close to you. And proxemics, there's a whole science of how this works. It's the science of space and how we interpret the space between us and other people and other objects, and that's called proxemics. Then there is something called haptics. We talked about sensory organs. Haptics is to do with touch, okay? You get haptic keyboards, your touch screens are haptics. When we shake hands, it's haptics. When we touch somebody else, it's haptics, and so on and so forth. So it's another classification of nonverbal cues. And finally, there's the concept of what we call chronemics. Chrono means time, and so time is also a non-verbal cue. And one of the simplest things that we do when we're trying to establish whether somebody's telling the truth or lying is to look at their eyes and to see how long it takes for them to respond to a question or whether they do so with the necessary paralanguage without too many fillers and ums and ers and hesitations. So when you put this whole thing together, you can tell whether the person is being truthful or not. It's a whole combination of these things, okay? And of course, there are the physical attributes, okay? Smell, temperature, color, appearance, all these they provide additional information that helps you to actually better understand what is intended, what is meant, what the real underlying emotions are. All these happen on account of metacommunication, okay? Facial expression is one of these, and you have to look at people, and then if you're not looking when you're speaking, you will not get the cues, okay? And you really need to, if you want to understand their real, true emotions, you need to be very observant of what they're doing. There are these things called micro-expressions. Micro-expressions are the involuntary twitches. Sometimes your mouth moves, or you flare your nostrils, or you move your eyebrows. If it's true, it's okay. However, if the person is trying to be obfuscative, to try and cover or hide something, then immediately that expression will change. And in that millisecond, when you see the true expression before it gets masked, that is a micro-expression, okay? But that's the detail. But take the message away. Look at people when you speak to them. It's very important. You see me on a screen, and probably, or if you and I were in classroom together, and I walk into the class, without my having said a word, before I begin to say anything, purely by looking at me, I'm sure you would have reached certain assumptions. You would have reached certain conclusions. You would have made some assumptions, reached some conclusions about me, the kind of person I am, or how this course is going to work out, etc., etc., etc. Okay? There's very simple, is that appearance itself is there, and then maybe you can take a look at the picture, and you see 5 different people dressed differently, and the question is, whom would you trust? Okay? You will make assumptions based on appearance, and you will come to conclusion based on those assumptions as to who is more trustworthy, what is this person going to be like. And there's no need for anybody to have said anything. Okay? So what we see influences our judgment without necessarily the need for verbal input. Okay? This is the power of non-verbal communication. Look at a handshake. It's a haptic activity. So let me not get into the details. Do you think you can actually learn something about the person based on how they present their hand to you and how they shake it? Okay? Is it hard or soft or limp? Do they push back? Talks about their personality. They talk about the emotionality. Do they smile? Is the hand sweaty or is it dry? Will tell you about whether that person is anxious or not. Do they maintain eye contact when they're shaking your eye? That tells you something else. Letting go of your hand. Have you noticed some people just don't let go of your hand, right? Okay, that gives you other signals. So there's a lot to be learned in a handshake. So just an example of what you can do with metacommunication. So in the last few minutes, you've actually looked at something which is very exciting and very different. Maybe it's something completely new to you, the concept of metacommunication, which helps you to draw effective, more realistic, more accurate interpretations of what people are saying. Okay? An awareness of metacommunication helps us to better understand and interpret verbal messages that we receive, because it adds to it. Okay? So we need to consciously look for verbal and body language cues while interacting with other people. This is important because it will give you lot of data about them. And similarly, we need to become aware that some of these meta cues that we put out, we have to become more aware of the meta cues that we involuntarily put out without our being aware of it, right? And so try and control this to the extent that you don't give negative signals, okay? Positive communication and cues is fine, but sometimes you may need to actually hide by suppressing and being aware of the fact that you can manipulate your meta cues to better and more positively complete the message. There's some reading for you to get into more detail on this. There's an article titled Metacommunication, and also there is a couple of things that you can learn from pages 31 to 36 of Communicating for Results, Chapter 2. Do take a look at them. And of course, if you have the time and interest, there's this very interesting 6-7 minute video titled Body Language Essentials for Business. You would do well to take a look at it because it's fun and it's going to reinforce all the learning that you had in this segment.